All right, let's talk about what's been happening in the US grain markets because things have gotten pretty intense. We're going to unpack a major downturn, and it's a wild story where you've got policy, weather, global economics, and even geopolitics all crashing into each other at the exact same time. So let's get right into it.
So picture this, September 18th. For American farmers looking at the markets, it was just a sea of red. I mean, prices for corn, soybeans, wheat, they were all down. And this wasn't just some minor blip on the radar. This was a big, broad slide. It's what happens when you get a perfect storm of bad news all hitting at once. So you have to ask, what is going on here, right? Why are prices falling so hard, especially when farmers are dealing with incredibly high costs to even get their crops in the ground? Well, that's what we're here to do. We're going to peel back all the different layers of this story, from the halls of Washington, D.C., all the way to the fields of Brazil. Here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll kick things off with a major policy fight happening right now. Then we'll talk about the sheer pressure of the U.S. harvest itself. After that, we're going to zoom out to look at global supply and some tricky currency stuff. Then we'll turn to the huge wild card in the room, China. And finally, we'll tie it all together and see what it means for the farmer's bottom line. Okay, first up, one of the biggest things shaking the market right now is a high-stakes battle brewing in Washington. And honestly, it's a classic showdown. You've got big ag on one side and big oil on the other. And right at the center of this whole thing is a new proposal from the EPA about biofuel rules. The problem is they haven't made a final decision, and that uncertainty has basically thrown a giant wet blanket on the market. It really weakens the demand outlook for biofuels, which, is a huge deal for corn and soybean oil.
So, to really get this, you need to know what a small refinery exemption, or SRE, is. Think of it like a get-out-of-jail-free card. It's a waiver that lets smaller oil refineries off the hook from their legal duty to blend biofuels like ethanol into their gasoline. The million-dollar question then becomes, what happens to those gallons they didn't have to blend?
And this right here, this is the heart of the fight. On one side, you have agriculture and the biofuel industry, and they're saying, hey, those waived gallons have to be given to the bigger refineries. We need 100% reallocation so that biofuel demand stays strong. But on the other side, big oil wants predictability and lower costs, which to them means reallocating as little as possible, maybe even zero. You've got two giants wanting completely opposite things. So what did the EPA do? Well, instead of making a call, they put out a proposal with a few options, like 100% or 50% reallocation. But then they opened it up for public comment on anything from 0 to 100%. The result? Total limbo. Nobody expects a clear answer until maybe December. And that's just putting a real chill on the whole market, especially for things like biomass diesel. All right, let's step away from Washington for a minute and head out to the fields, because there's another massive pressure building, and it's the sheer weight of this year's U.S. harvest. It's that time of year, right? Combines are rolling all across the Corn Belt. And as they do, a huge wave of brand new corn and soybeans is flooding onto the market. This is classic seasonal pressure. When you've got this much new supply, unless there's some major good news to balance it out, prices are just going to have a hard time going up. And listen, this isn't just any harvest. The USDA is forecasting a record-breaking U.S. corn crop, a record. And the soybean crop, it's expected to be the 5th largest ever. So even if some of the early yield reports are a little mixed, we're still talking about a mountain of grain. Plus, a lot of farmers have to sell right off the combine just to get some cash flowing, and that just adds even more supply to an already heavy market. Okay, so now let's zoom out, because the pressure isn't just coming from inside the U.S. We've got huge global supplies and a surprisingly strong dollar that are adding even more weight, and that makes our grain a tougher sell on the world stage. First off, let's just look at our number one competitor, Brazil. Their own crop agency is forecasting a soybean harvest of nearly 178 million metric tons. I mean, that is a jaw-dropping, record-breaking number. That's a huge increase from their last crop, which was already massive. All that supply from South America means U.S. farmers are in a dogfight for every single global customer. And it's not just soybeans. The world is also swimming in wheat. The International Greens Council just bumped up its global production forecast by another 8 million metric tons. When you have this much of a commodity sloshing around the world market, it just puts a heavy lid on prices everywhere, including right here at home. On top of all that supply, you've got this weird economic situation going on. The Fed just cut interest rates. Normally, you'd think that would make the US dollar weaker. But nope, the dollar actually got stronger. And a strong dollar makes American grain more expensive for anybody trying to buy it overseas, which is yet another obstacle for our exports.
And now for the geopolitical wildcard. With all these other factors swirling around, there's a single high-stakes phone call that has the entire market just frozen, waiting for a headline.
There is a call scheduled for Friday between the President of the United States and the President of China. And with so much other bad news in the air, this one event has basically caused paralysis in the market. Traders are just sitting on their hands, not wanting to make any big moves until they see what happens with this call. Market analyst Brian Doherty put it perfectly. He said the mood is just exhaustion and waiting. The market's waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And you can feel it. Everyone's just looking for some kind of direction, and right now, all eyes are on that phone call. So let's break this down. The big hope is for some kind of breakthrough that gets China buying massive amounts of US soybeans again. But the reality is, China is already really late in buying our new crop this year. And here's the biggest wildcard of all. The official topic of the call is supposedly TikTok, not agriculture. So while everyone's hoping for a trade deal, nobody knows if it'll even come up. So after digging into policy, the harvest, the global picture, and geopolitics, let's bring it all back home. What does this perfect storm of negativity really mean for the American farmer? You know, at the end of the day, it's not any single one of these things pushing prices down. It's all of them converging at the same time. You've got the policy mess in Washington, the incredible pressure from a huge harvest, fierce global competition, and this deep, deep anxiety over what's going to happen with China, our biggest customer. It's everything at once. And if you want to know how serious this is, just look at the government support. We're talking about over $40 billion in aid expected to go to farmers this year. That is the second highest amount since the Great Depression. That money has become an absolutely critical lifeline for a lot of people. But even with that historic level of aid, the future feels shaky. Because here's the thing. If these low prices stick around and those government payments start to dry up, net farm income could plummet by more than $30 billion next year. So that support, it's a bandage, but it's not fixing the underlying problem in the market. And that leaves us with this final, pretty tough question. When our farmers are up against record crops in Brazil, a strong dollar they can't control, and geopolitical games being played halfway around the world, it really makes you ask, in a market this connected, how much control do we really have over our own destiny here at home? That's the question the entire industry is trying to figure out right now. Thanks for tuning in.